Like movie.
Hi everybody, it's Sam again. Okay, so this next vlog, I decided to talk a little bit about my experiences with self-harm, and sort of what's worked for me and what hasn't, and see if people have any thoughts about that, what their experiences are. So trigger warning, self-harm talk in this whole post, obviously. So, self-harm. I don't remember the first time I ever heard about self-harm. Um, Although I'm sure I heard about it like at some point, or read about it, because it is in the media, obviously. So I knew at some point that people, cut themselves or whatever to deal with their emotions. I remember, I'm trying to think when I first started self-harm. I think it was like 19. And for me, it's always been about, releasing stress and releasing these emotions when they build up and I feel out of control. That's been sort of how, that's been sort of why I've done it. And especially growing up in a family where you can't show emotion, or upset, cry. Like I would always, I'm a crying person when I get upset, and my family really cut me down for it. So instead of crying, there was no other way for me to calm down or switch off my emotions except to feel the physical pain, and that would distract me and that would get me out of that gear I was in because I had no other way of doing it, which is really sad. So I remember when I was 19 and I had this really sharp, this crystal, like you can get it at the store and it's like hangs on a chain, and it's this crystal and it had a really sharp point. And I remember I was like really stressed out because when I was 19 and 20, I was at home. It was between high school and start of college in 2008, and there was so much going on, like contacting the Social Security, my commission for the blind caseworker who was really stupid, and like just so much going on. And I remember one day, like, there had so much going on, like the Social Security thing was going on, like the caseworker was about to come, everything. And so I just grabbed it and scratched my wrist with it, and all of a sudden I didn't feel like crying, and I had to go downstairs like quickly. So I had gone from, basically in tears upstairs, trying to figure out how I'm gonna look okay to my parents in 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, and I ended up scratching, and that ended up, taking my focus away from all that stress and all those emotions that were about to pouring out. So ever since then I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. So I never drew blood, except for when they scabbed over, and then I'd pick at them and then there'd be blood. But the initial like scratch is more of like a burn where like you break the skin and it's just like a layer of skin comes off, or whatever you want to call it. So I would use just like paper clips, my nails, whatever, anything sharp, but I would never use like knives or anything. So yeah, I scratched from like, so I would do it off and on. Definitely when I was 19, my psychiatrist found out about it. We talked about it. My parents found out about it. I stopped for a while. I did it more in college. Different therapists and people found out about it, and didn't really know how to help me because, they never really helped me get to the root of it, that I just could not bear to feel these feelings, because I was so afraid of being, reprimanded, because I had been reprimanded for feeling what I was feeling. And so, yeah, I mean, that was basically my reason why I did it. And I also did it as a way to show, like, myself and the world, what was going on with me. And, like, I would know, okay, like, this scratch is when mom was stressed out and I couldn't take her being stressed out. Like, okay, this scratch higher up was when, the caseworker came and I got upset. This scratch was when, the social security letter came and we have to do something else. I knew what each one was from. And, I guess that kind of gave me a sense of, I don't know, control, or, I don't know, just a way to, I guess, label what was going on with me and, have it out there, like, this is what's been going on and this is why I'm, I don't know. But I just remember knowing what each one of them was and just, like, yeah, I don't know. It was helpful. To me. And I knew it wasn't right, but at the same time it's like, well, what do you expect me to do? Like, I can't cry, I can't, I can't pretend that this is not as upsetting as it is, unless I'm, like, not in tears and I'm just kind of numb, and then I act as if it's okay and it's not, and then, So anyways, it was going on off and on, and definitely once I finally got to Friedman Place, I was doing it a lot. I was doing it a lot to cope with my feelings when I didn't have a therapist. The best therapist I had to help me cope with my feelings was this woman named Deborah in Massachusetts, who was awesome. And we really talked about my emotions, letting out my emotions, everything else like that, using this creative arts therapy that she worked in. And then once I got to Friedman Place, I really didn't have any of those outlets. I had therapists telling me that I was too emotional, that I wasn't, that I was just out of control and just too emotional, too sensitive, everything else, just like my parents told me, and that just made things worse. So I would self-harm a lot. And the nurses sort of knew about it, but they didn't know what to say. That was what this one nurse said, who was really sweet. She's like, I knew you had this, I knew it was probably self-harm, but, like, I didn't know how to talk to you. And, that kind of makes sense. So I showed up at Albany Care with self-harming, and Jonathan over there, the clinical director, thinks that was actually one of the bigger issues of facilities not taking me, was the self-harm than the blindness, but I don't believe that. I believe the blindness, unless they wanted to make that as an excuse. But, I mean, it happened so much, the discrimination and the liability concept and everything else, that I wasn't surprised about the blindness. And I'm not surprised about the self-injury either, because so many facilities won't help with that. So I got there and was self-harming and totally didn't care that I was doing it. I'm like, I don't care. I don't even want to be alive. Like, leave me alone. So, they did the whole, like, safety contracts, like, coping skills, what can you do instead, think positive, do this, do that, and their methods weren't working because I didn't care about the safety contracts, I didn't care about losing privileges, I was just like, I want to sleep, I don't, unless you say I can't sleep, then I'll have something to say, but other than that, like, just leave me alone, and I had to be on one-to-one, and I hated it. But I was like, whatever, I don't care, just go away. And that was kind of my attitude from November, mid-November, when I first came to Albany Care, to February, when I first started working with Jonathan. And Jonathan was like, okay, we need to figure out what's going on, because, like, the observation room wasn't working, one-to-one wasn't working, safety contracts weren't working. I was just scratching away and totally did not care, and was even in these huge power struggles with all the staff. I was like, whatever, who's gonna stop first? It's not gonna be me, So he came up with harm reduction. So harm reduction is, you take the behavior and you see, okay, we need to figure out why this is going on, and focus on that, not the behavior. So let's have the behavior be as harmless as possible while we're focusing on the root of it, because the root of it is the most important thing. It's not the scratching that's the problem. It's not the scratching. It's me not being able to connect in a healthy way with staff, because we're just so focused on that. And we're not focused on me as a person really connecting and creating relationships where I can express my emotions without being afraid that I'm going to get hurt, and that I'm going to get ignored, or I'm going to get, told off for expressing feelings. So he was very smart about that. So what he did was, he said, okay, if you scratch, you're going to need to scratch just with your nails. I said, all right. And he said, we're going to make your nails really, really, really short. And my nails grew really quickly, so that was interesting. I had a lot of manicures by the different staff, by nursing. They always be like, come on, yeah, we just cut this, or file. But my fingernails were really short. So it was like the least damage possible. So what I had in the beginning was a lot more scratches, but the scratches were not as deep. And that was the important thing for him. So we just went off that foundation and then really dug into, okay, my past, my family's issues, the PTSD I had, the things I had with witnessing my sister go through so much, and then honestly, like, feeling her emotions that she wasn't even feeling, but it's like I wasn't feeling them. And that was a huge thing, but basically they're brushing me off, and he basically said, in your house you had to pretend that whatever was going on was not as bad as it was, and you never got to process anything. So like, if he always did this scale 1 to 10, he's like, so if you had a problem and your feeling on the problem was a 9 or a 10, and you were feeling horrible about it, you had to tell your parents or show your parents that it was like, I don't know, a 4 or a 3. So if they had a problem that was a 4 or a 3, they would process the 4 or the 3. They'd talk about it. They'd drink. They'd do whatever they wanted to do to process it so it's over. With me, I had to pretend that it was less than it was, and then I never processed anything. And so it was just worse. So we talked, and we had our big ups and downs, but he fought for me. He fought for me with the staff, because they were not sold on this harm reduction thing, especially nursing. They're like, what the hell, why aren't we calling the MD? It's like, because hospitalization doesn't work for her. Sitting in the hospital 1-to-1 and whatever, that's not going to stop her from doing it. And so that's why we're not calling the doctor. And he is such an advocate that he'd be kind of like, well, end of story. And he had a good relationship with the director of nursing, so he could be that way. But she still wasn't happy, and neither was nursing. So we had a lot of misunderstandings between nursing, CNAs, and the social workers, who caught on more quickly to the self-harm thing, to the harm reduction thing. And then there was also a book that was published by Alexian Brothers, which is a hospital in Illinois that doesn't take Medicaid, or else I would have gotten treatment there, that they deal specifically with self-harm. And there was a big book about that they had written, and so he was reading the book, he was giving other people the book to read, and that gave them a context for this whole thing, because it was similar stuff going on, of not just focusing on, oh my god, this person's, how do we keep this person's skin intact, versus what is really going on. So yeah, what was I gonna say? So that was something that really helped me, because it stopped being about the cutting, and that's what, it got to the root of it, and I think that's what's important. So that's about it. I just wanted to let everyone know sort of what my strategies were for the self-harming, which was creating relationships with staff that were very safe, where I could let out my feelings, and where I wasn't, in a place where I was afraid of the reaction, and it took a while. And it took a while of me learning to compromise, me learning to give people a chance, and people learning to give me a chance. And, it was a lot. It was hard work. And I'll never forget it, and it's built the foundation for why I don't self-harm anymore, because it's like, I look at the relationship, because it's like, say I wanted to self-harm here, which I don't, but like, let's say, I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to get the relationship support I need. All I'm going to get is, well, you need to sit on 1-to-1, or you need to be on the unit and just sit there for 3 days. That's not going to help me. What would help me would be if I did self-harm, to be with someone that knew why I did it, and could still, could be like, okay, we're going to figure this out together. That's what I would need, not a safety contract. But the way things stand now, if I were to self-harm, I would get a safety contract. So it's not the two things are not in line with each other, and so that's why I keep a lot to myself. But I keep a lot to myself with the knowledge that I also can't, I can't use the self harm, or I could, but it would not give me the results that I need. And yeah, sometimes, and this could sound a little like manipulative, sometimes I would self harm because I wanted to get back at staff. This was at Albany Care, and Jonathan's like, well, if you're going to get back at us, it's not going to work. Because, that's just not it. And here I don't even have that connection where I can honestly be like, hey, I wanted to get your attention. And of course he didn't reward that behavior, so that became like one or two incidents of it, and that was it. But, so yeah. Yeah, that's sort of what's been going on. And of course now I just dissociate, I think. When I get super depressed or super anxious, I just dissociate. And then I'm honey or amber or whatever. That's like my new thing. Okay, I will talk to everyone later. Bye.
Ribbon, web, stop button.